trade than an academic discipline. So I think it's more important to be curious and able to communicate and then have a background in other things. So, if you've written 100 stories, you can keep writing stories. If you've fixed a toilet, you can fix another toilet, kind of thing. It's something you learn by doing. So that's kind of, I don't have a journalism degree and I've never had any intention of getting one. But many people have them, and I think it's great that they have them. That's just not how I approach the craft.
That sounds good. Also, what was a favorite memory from your Taylor days?
Taylor Upland, I was a second center English girl, and one fall, for some reason, we decided that the best thing in the world to do was to dive in puddles. And it must have been a particularly wet fall. And there was about 7 of us that would, in like 11 o'clock at night, go sliding through all of the puddles. And it was the floor leadership too. So no one was stopping us.
Wow.
We were all just doing it. We trashed the bathrooms, and then we felt bad and we bought a bunch of gift cards for the housekeepers because we trashed the bathrooms. That was fun.
Christian schools. Boy.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? And back
really
then there was nothing there. There was nothing there. There was, you had Toppet, you had Ivanhoe's, and that was it.
Well, you could go get donuts at midnight over in what was that little town over there? Hartford City?
Hartford City, yeah.
Yep. All right. So I'm excited to learn about what you're teaching us. I think it's incredibly important now more than ever. So I'm going to stop talking. I'll leave my camera on. And I think you were going to share your screen, and whatever you need to do, you take over and we'll go from here.
Okay. A quick background about my professional life in journalism. I was a print journalism for part of the 1990s, and then starting in 2001, I had been predominantly at newspapers. And then in 2017, I switched to public media, and I am a news director at the local NPR affiliate in Fort Wayne, which is WBOI 89.1. And it's quite a change, but the ethic is the same. It's very similar in how we approach newspapers to public media is very similar. TV kind of does commercial television, commercial radio kind of do their own thing in their own way. So I'm going to come into tonight. I was telling everyone earlier that I teach journalism as an adjunct, and I teach it in big blocks of time. So the 15 minutes is stressing me out a little bit. So I'm going to try to come to this with the assumption that I'm dealing with people who are very media literate, who read newspapers, who listen to public radio, who get their news from solid sources. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to explain one of the issues that I found myself having to explain both in the group and also on social media and in conversation over the last few years. And then 2, talk a little bit about the dangers between not knowing the difference between news gathering and news commentary. So we'll start first with this idea of a how. So one of the things that reporters do is reporters journalism by its very nature is to present to the public in the American model an unbiased, objective perspective on what is occurring. And we understand that when we do that, we are doing it in as complete a way as possible at the time in which the event is occurring, right? But we don't have all of the information. A good journalist, a good reporter who's following the Society of Professional Journalism ethics standards, who is concerned about their craft, who's concerned about representing the entirety of the truth, is not going to use words that are loaded, and they are not going to tell you, they're not going to label the thing for you. This example that I use is, and I use this with my class, every lion is a cat, but not every cat is a lion. So one of the things that I've noticed, and you see this a lot on social media, you see it a lot, and then you see it in commentary, is the interchanging of words that are not actually interchangeable. So on the screen here, you see I have murder, arson, homicide, suicide, etc. Those are actually legal terms. And one of the things that happens is that we understand as communicators that language is limited, right? Like there's only so, like a word for homicide, the word homicide implies one thing. A murder is a type of homicide, but a journalist cannot tell you that a murder occurred. That's up to the prosecutor. A journalist cannot even tell you that a homicide occurred. That's up to the coroner. So I think one of the things that we see, that I see people getting frustrated by, particularly in a lot of the discussions around the prior administration's lack of truthfulness, words like terrorism, words like murder, police violence, things like that, is that we look for the reporter to use the word that's not the reporter's to use. And I don't know if that makes any sense. And if you have any, I can clarify that a little bit if you have any more questions. But one of the things that the examples I would use is January 6th was something that we've never seen before, right? Like there was no journalistic language for what we saw occurring at 2:15 p.m. on January 6th. Within about 2 hours, National Public Radio sent out an email to every news director, every program director, everyone in all of the network across the country about what we were going to call it. And that provided for us, a safety mechanism as reporters, that this is something that has been legally vetted. It's determined to be an accurate use of a word, a legal use of a word. And it is the one we're going to use to describe it. And they started using the word insurrection right off the bat. And the reason for that was that it actually fit the legal definition of an insurrection, and they didn't want to wait for somebody else to say that. As a journalist, I could make the argument that there are reasons why we want to be cautious, and I understand that there are sometimes needs for us to be more aggressive in the words that we choose. But some of the words that journalists pick, particularly your beat reporters or your broadcast, like your hosts of your shows, they're not going to use words that aren't theirs to use. And some of those words are those words on the right there on your screen. Some of those words are things like Donald Trump lies, things like that. And it's infuriating. And some of it is to cover your ass, but other parts of it is because it's not the job of the journalist to attribute motive or to attribute legal standing. So if I'm doing I covered crime for 20 years, I could never use the word murder until my prosecutors filed paperwork that said it was a murder. Even if I was standing at a crime scene by the body, I couldn't call it a homicide because I didn't know if he killed himself, if it was an accident. You don't know, right? So there's a safety in that when you see the words that a reputable journalism has chosen, know that they have chosen those words. And when those words change, that means that the story is advancing, but there's a safety there, there's a trust there. And it's not editorializing, it's caution. And that in that caution is safety. And I'll kind of pause there and see if anyone has any questions about that, because it's weird. And I don't know if that was helpful. I don't know if that makes any sense. Anybody?
I think it's incredibly helpful. It makes a lot of sense to me, Rebecca. I think it's the first time I ever really thought about those words that you have listed here as being editorializing, right? And maybe that's part of what you'll talk about too, is that I think I don't even know what good journalism is anymore. Like I see so much of what you're talking about. That's the thing that I'm realizing. So that's not really a question, but that was just a comment. Eric, did you have, it looks like your hand's raised. Did you have a question?
I do. Yeah. So I'm wondering, oftentimes what you're speaking of seems to me to be like a high standard for journalism. But if I'm not mistaken, it seems like a lot of the more fringe sites on both the left and the right have a tendency to break that rule, and jump right to the conclusions. Are there repercussions from that for that professionally or legally?
So there should be, right? Like, I feel like there should be. And one of the reasons for me, I tell this story, and I'll tell it as quickly as I can. When I was a brand new reporter, I was covering a fire, and the fire started in a deep fat fryer in a restaurant. The police chief in this tiny little town, this little volunteer fire department, used the phrase broaster chicken. It started in the broaster chicken fryer. So I wrote that down. I put that in my story. I filed it. I went home and went to bed. By 9 o'clock the next morning, we had received a phone call from the lawyers for the broaster chicken company, because it was not a broaster. It was a deep fat henny penny chicken fryer. And broaster is proprietary. And so we had to show them that we were told this. This was not a word that I used, right? So you'll never see the word Kleenex, Xerox, highlighter, Band-Aid in print or on the air, because those are proprietary. And I think the legal definition should also be proprietary. And I think if you say that someone has committed a murder before they've been charged with murder or found guilty of murder, you are opening yourself up to a lawsuit. And I'm fine with that. I think there should be repercussions, because we should be careful with the way we label people and their behavior, right? Like, there is a legal standard for murder in the state of Indiana, and it's different than the legal standard for murder in Ohio. But it's not my job to declare that so. And one of the things that frustrates me the most about many of our local TV stations is they will use the word, there was a homicide committed, or there was a murder, police are investigating a murder. It's not a murder yet, right? And it's semantics, but it's safety, because it not only protects the person doing the reporting, but it protects the community, and it protects the person, even the guilty. It protects the guilty, right? Or the innocent. So I don't know if that cleared that up at all, but, and your question statement leads me kind of to this. So there's a difference between news gathering and news analysis, right? So this is news gathering. That's me this summer at a BLM protest, right before things got fun. I don't know who took the picture. It showed up somewhere. News gathering is being out, being about, being the person who compiles the information. It's usually not that interesting. It's usually just reading a lot, talking to people. And then there's news analysis, right? News gathering is expensive. Reporters are expensive. Equipment is expensive. Cameras, recorders, video cameras, all that is expensive. News analysis is super cheap. And we have decided as a country, and I'm freezing, sorry. You hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Did I come back?
Yep. We're all good.
All right, let me get that back up here.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Great stuff.
Anyway, so let's see. So so we have lots of analysis, right? MSNBC, CNN, all of that is full. That's 99% of it is news analysis. And the problem is, and this is a problem with people's social media news feeds, is that there's no distinction between what's a news article and what is an opinion piece, and even what is an editorial piece versus what is an opinion column. And there's a difference there too, right? So an editorial writer for the New York Times is going to do some research. They're going to do some reporting, hopefully, before they write their piece, right? When we think of Nick Kristof, right, or Paul Krugman, those are very knowledgeable people in a particular field using that lens to talk about news. But talking heads on cable opining about the articles that they read or the story of the day is not necessarily news. And those standards, the picking of the words, the accountability for the words doesn't exist, right? So if Mika and Joe call Donald Trump a liar or say that something is a murder, there's nothing that happens to them if they're wrong. But you can't unring the bell. And since most of the people get their news now from analysis or commentary versus gathering and reporting, there's a gap. And I think one of the dangers of the loss of the print newspaper is that in a print newspaper, it's organized, right? You have your international news, your state and local news, you have your opinion, you have your sports, and you have your features. You don't have that in a news feed unless you're good enough to know how to curate your own news feed and how to read the difference between opinion and reporting. And I think that's where a lot of people, and I think it feeds into this notion that the media is somehow, the traditional journalism is somehow biased because what they're seeing is analysis. They're not actually seeing the reporting, they're seeing the commentary on the reporting, and that's different. This is the annual Ad Fontes media bias chart. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. I will post a link to this in the Taylor group. This lists, and it's an interactive chart on their website, all of the media that they track, and they track everyone. There's really small outlets on here and really good large legacy media. And if you look here, you can see the AP remains the gold standard for original fact reporting, and it's right in the middle. Reuters, UPI, NPR, they're all right up there at the top in that cluster. Here's a little fun fact. Public media, which is PBS or NPR or PRX, because we're a nonprofit, we cannot actually have any editorial content. So you will not hear commentary. You will hear some commentary, but we are very careful. They used to get in trouble for Cokie Roberts, for heaven's sake, because she was a little too partisan. So the nonprofit model of journalism, if that were to expand, like ProPublica, organizations like that, if that were to continue to grow, and I hope that it does, I think ultimately that could bring a bit of a corrective to that. And if people tell you, oh, that's a liberal, it's actually not possible for it to be liberal or conservative, because it operates under federal nonprofit laws, and it can't take a position, shouldn't take a position. I don't have a whole lot else. I don't know if that was helpful at all. I don't want to take up too much time. I want to leave time for questions if anybody has any. Thank you for the opportunity. I don't usually get to speak on journalism while wearing my fluffy LL Bean slippers. So it's kind of fun. Nice change pace. I am a pacer when I teach though. So sitting in the chair in my little home office is very confining, but.
No, Rebecca, I thought that I'm really proud. I wouldn't say proud of you. That sounds condescending, but I know how hard it was for you to figure out what to talk about in just that short amount of time. And I think you did an excellent job of picking the right things. I mean, I'm sure the other stuff you have is fantastic too, but to me, it's personally helpful. And I think it also, it's going to do both. It's going to help me, and it's going to make me even more frustrated when I see how many of this reporting is not really that, right? And I think what you said about people getting their news from analysis is just, I don't know. I know this shouldn't be something that I feel, but I feel like that gives me good fuel. That gives me like a good bullet for my gun to like.
I'm glad that that's helpful.
Yeah, super helpful.
Eric asked why people think news outlets, NPR and AP, are left biased. There is that cliche, facts have a liberal bias. And I think part of that is there's some truth in that, particularly when we have an entire news organization that's devoted to protecting the right flank of the American political system. And so anything then that is out of step with that is going to feel biased, right? Like, and when you have, and I think one of the problems, and I won't take up too much time, but one of the problems that we saw during the run up to the 2016 election was political reporters don't know how to cover crime. And I'm not trying to sound as political as this is going to sound. The prior administration, having kind of been birthed in crime, kind of needed to be covered a little bit more like a crime. And there's not two sides to crime, right? Like there might be 50 sides to crime, but as a journalist, I'm not overly interested as to why a person committed a murder right away, right? Like we'll get there, but I don't care about their opinion when charges are filed, right? So what happened when there was actual allegations of misconduct, many allegations of misconduct, in order to both sides it, what we got was the only allegation of misconduct against Secretary Clinton was her emails. So you'd have a news story every day about one side and that same one story on the other side, because that was the only thing they had. And it made it seem much more important than it was. And I think hopefully as a profession, we've learned some things. I'm not optimistic, but I hope that we have. Reinstating the fairness doctrine, yes. Yes, please. But it's not going to be as easy, and it's not going to fix it in the way that people think that it will. I really think the best solution is more information, better information, and that each human being, all of us, are accountable for the information that we receive, the information that we share, and that we hold those people around us accountable for that as well. Gently, would say, hey, raw story isn't really the best place to go, even if you like it, right? Like I enjoy an evening with Rachel Maddow, but I recognize that that's analysis. And there's a certain, like, almost like we need like here's 101 news consumption, and you have to be able to drive, like I can drive Rachel Maddow because I know the difference, right? Like, and I can sit down and I can watch Fox at the gym and know exactly what the problem is because I'm a professional. But somebody's Uncle Bob is not necessarily able to drive that car.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was some sort of test you had to pass.
For all of it. Read a book. Right. Do something.
Amy asked a great question about, and we'll end on this, a list of keywords that we could watch for like watch for to help us understand if this is opinion or if it's fact? Yeah. Like, is there anything you can give us about that?
I think the context of it is important, right? So I think if you pull up, if someone shares an article and you pull it up, there's this kind of thing we do. It's called, like, it actually has a name now, lateral reading, right? And I do this when people send me stuff. I'll pull up that article and I will Google search it, and then I will find its other places it's occurring in nature, and then try to distill that down to the original source. So look at where it came from, see if you can find it in a legacy media environment, which would be your Washington Post, your Times, your NPR, AP, ABC, NBC, people that are not willing to get sued for being reckless, that people that give a shit, pardon my French, that can be helpful, right? So if you can't trace something that someone shared back to an original piece of reporting that matches standards that you know are not hyperbolic and exaggerated and reckless, and I think everyone here is, really smart and knows that. And I think, so just take a minute, right? And give yourself a minute. And even before you wade into arguments on the internet, give yourself a minute to kind of do that lateral search for it in nature. I don't know if that was helpful, but context is really your key. Context and whose name is on it, right? If Paul Krugman's name is on it, there's going to be reporting in there, but it's going to have analysis as well. If, Philip Rucker from the Washington Post's name is on it, it's just reporting, because that's his job. And places like the Washington Post and the New York Times will label it commentary. And that's a thing that they're doing on digital platforms, and they should. And I am always available. I am not kidding. Send me anything you want me to verify. I will help you. Absolutely. Saving the world from misinformation is like my passion.
That should be on your cape. When you have your superhero cape, like that should be on the back of it. Yeah. That'll be your tagline.
Fact, girl.
Nice. All right, Rebecca, thank you so much. It was super helpful, everybody. Like, round of applause. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for spending your time doing it.
Thank you for letting me enjoy it.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like you'd be willing for us to reach out to you or whatever.
Absolutely.
And have more questions answered. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and if there's anything, if there's anything I can help anyone with, or do this again about another topic, it's fine.
And please do link to that chart. I've seen other similar ones, but I'd like to have that one.
Yep.
Okay.
I will do it before I get out of my chair.
Perfect.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone. Obligatory Zoom wave. Goodbye. And we'll see you all next week for our 3rd episode of the Belltower.
That's awesome.
Working title.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. It was good to see you guys. Have a great week. Stay positive. Stay healthy. Take care of yourselves. Bye. 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 Eric, you're still here.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the leave button on my phone.
It's okay. I'll end it for both of us. I'll take us out.
All right. Thanks so much.
See you later.